Hello artists, today we're going to be starting to work with depth of field, which basically means blurring an image and keeping one part in crystal clear clarity. It's just a nice little hack you can do. You're basically mimicking depth of field, focusing on a camera. So let's get started. We're going to go to File, Open, Courses, Art, Computer Graphic Lessons, Photoshop Lessons. We're still in that photo restoration folder. And I want you to open up the file that says Depth of Field Lesson. Should be a picture of PE teacher, Miss Miller. We're going to save this in our cloud, so File, Save As. Let's save this in our cloud. Let's save it in your Lessons folder. And again, your first name, always with your first name, and then Depth of Field, so DOF, and we'll just call it DOF. All right, it's really not that difficult. Basically what we're doing is we're applying a blur filter on it, but we're isolating the blur to the outside of a selected area, and we're going to be using the blur filter gallery. So we're going to go up to Filter, Blur Gallery, and we're going to open up Iris Blur. And in fact, when we click on Iris Blur, it's going to actually open up all 5 of these in a dialog box, so you're going to see it over here. So if I pull this panel out, this is the panel that you're going to need. Okay, so you can see we're in the Iris Blur, but if I decided I wanted to change my mind, I could click on the other ones, and I'll show you those in a little bit. All right, so here's the way that this works. So you can see right now, kind of by default, it sets up this oval kind of shape, and everything inside the oval is in nice clear, and everything outside is kind of blurry. This just helps you focus on your area of emphasis. So you start by first taking the center point, and you want to move it onto the part that you want to be crystal clear and everything else to be blurred. You can change the shape and size. So you can click and drag, you can make it more circular, you can make it more oval, you can even tilt it, you can rotate it. Okay, so that's how that works. You can change the amount of blur 2 ways. You can either click on the dial in the center, so you see it's starting to really blur that, or in the panel to the left, I can drag the slider. Okay. The next thing you'll notice is you should have these 4 little dots on kind of like the inside of the circle. What that does is it just changes the rate at which it kind of makes the blur happen. Okay. Do I want it to just start blurring suddenly? So the closer you put those dots to the outside, it's going to be really, really crisp, and then all of a sudden it's going to blur. If I want it to be more subtle and gradual, I'm going to move those in a little bit closer, right? That's pretty much all there is to it, but I want to show you the other options just if you want to play around with it. One thing also I want to double check before we go on to those other ones is if you don't have preview up here at the top selected in your control bar or control panel, you need to do that, because if I don't, it's gonna not show you what the effects are in real time. So we always want to click on that preview option. So if we are happy to this, we would just click OK. But I want to show you the other options that you do have. So I can turn off the iris blur for just a second. Okay. So what the field blur does is it's gonna just blur the entire thing. Okay, Miss Miller and all. So that's what my field blur does. You can see I'm turning it off because I'm like, nah, I don't like that. That was the iris blur, but I'm just going to turn it off for now. The tilt blur is kind of cool. So instead of doing it radial around, it does it like in a bar shape. And it works exactly the same way. So if I want this to be crystal clear, and if I want to tilt it, I can tilt it. I should be able to drag. There we go. Where those blur lines are. Oops, I just moved my point. So you can see, you can just kind of play with this one. This one is harder to work with, I'm not going to lie. It still blurs the same way, more or less. So that's the tilt blur. I'm going to turn that one off. The path blur, this one's even harder, I think, to work with. But what the path blur does, I'm just showing you these, is it kind of makes it look as if, so if Miss Miller was running, I could blur everything in behind her or after her in different, so I could actually create a path, and it blurs it in the path. Do you see how that kind of works? It's kind of crazy. You play around with it if you want, but that one's a tough one to work with. And then the last one is the spin blur. It does what it exactly sounds like. So instead of blurring around the outside, it's going to blur what's in that area. It's just limited. There's very, very few times you would ever need something like this. But it's there. It's fun if you ever just want to play around with it and see what it does, okay? But we're not going to apply the spin blur. We're going to go back to the iris. Make sure you turn that one on. Fine tune it to the way you like and click OK. And there we go. We've applied our blur. It's just subtle. If I wanted to apply more, I would apply more. That's it. Depth of field, super fast. Have some fun with it. Make sure that you invite me in Photoshop, and then also that you hit mark as done in Google Classroom when you're done. Excellent job.